What's up, guys? This is Farhenthold again, back with VegasOdds.com, here for another day of trying to put you on to some winners for some sports coming up here in the not so distant future. However, like last time, you're probably wondering, what is this guy going to talk about today? Again, with the assortment of sports memorabilia behind me, I could really go anyway. But today, I'm going to go ahead and put you on one of the bets that I think I really like most heading into the 2022 NFL football season. It's also one of my favorite ways to bet on football in terms of the preliminary lead up to it. And that would be a good old futures bet. I'm sure everyone's, kind of looked at those over-under lines, really deciding, which ones do I like? What win totals do I not like? And so for me, one that I really wanted to focus on today, and it may surprise some people, it may not. Hopefully it doesn't surprise that many. But the team that I want to talk about today on their over-under would be the Arizona Cardinals, with their over-under being set at 9.5. Now, this is easily the ones that jumped out to me the most, because I think when I go through and I really look at the teams, at what they did and how they improved their roster and how things shake out for the Cardinals, I know that they were really solid last year. They had a 10-win season. I think that was a little bit better than most people expected. And for that reason, at over under 9.5, I would strongly suggest going with the under 9.5 win total for the Cardinals at what currently stands at minus 180. So really, when I look through Arizona, what I try to find, first thing I want to kind of go through is their offseason and what they did. And I will say, for me personally, the Cardinals had one of the more underwhelming off seasons. It wasn't some sort of a complete disaster failure that you could have seen, but it really wasn't something that made me sit there and think the Cardinals got better. They went out and made a trade that I really, in a lot of ways, didn't totally understand. They went out and got Marquise Hollywood-Brown, but they traded for him by giving up a first-round pick. I think in their minds are trying to recreate the magic that him and Kyler had at Oklahoma, where they had a 7.9% big play rate together, which if they can recreate that, that's huge. But the problem is that, Marquise Hollywood-Brown had a lot of opportunities, if not the best opportunity, to be the number one guy in Baltimore. And Lamar hit him in the hands a lot. I mean, that game against Detroit last season, where that was just blank after blank hitting his hands and coming up with nothing, kind of startled me really overall. I mean, I think Marquise is a good player, but for him to go over there for a first-round pick, a little bit rich in my mind. And the guy they took afterwards, Trey McBride, I mean, they added to an already really tight end room with Zach Ertz, so that pick didn't really make a lot of sense. I think you'd go around and look otherwise. The free agency, if anything, in the free agency pool, they got worse. They let Chandler Jones, who was their best outside pass rusher, just leave. He's not on the team anymore. That means you're leaning more on J.J. Watt, who's coming back from injury. I don't think he's the same guy, certainly, that he was in Houston during those prime years of 20-sack seasons. And I think, too, when you look at it, perhaps the biggest thing that I fear for the Cardinals from the offseason was losing DeAndre Hopkins to a PED suspension for 6 games. I think that's really big for a separate reason we'll get to here in a second, but losing easily one of the most dominant receivers in the NFL for what is ultimately 1/3 of the season, not really great for a team who struggles sometimes to move the ball in the later half of the year with the offense. So I think along with that, one of the things I really worry about too is that a lot of question marks have surrounded Kyler Murray in Arizona this offseason. I think there's been more talk than anything else about how bad does he truly want to be there. And I think it's a valid question. There's been comments brought up, by others in the locker room of him, not being there for OTAs, questioning the leadership capability. Not really loving that either. So the offseason overall was underwhelming. Again, I don't think when you look at the roster, okay, Hollywood-Brown, decent. But the wide receiver room without Hopkins, of Brown, AJ Green, and Rondell Moore doesn't really seem like something that's that explosive. Zach Ertz is another great player on there, tight end. But again, he's not the same guy that he was in Philly. He's still a solid player, but not someone who, really pushes, the needle one way or the other. And I think, again, you lose your best pass rusher in Arizona. You lose Chandler Jones. I think that really hurts. I don't think the draft for them was that particularly great. Now, another thing with the Cardinals that really worries me, and I think I've been on this for a while, obviously you don't have the discourse for me talking about it because I'm new on here. I think the guy leading the Cardinals, Cliff Kingsbury, is not the guy. I truthfully don't buy into Cliff Kingsbury a lot. I don't understand in a lot of ways how he got the job from Arizona. But the thing for me is that if you look at Cliff, there's a really bad stat for him that I always think about that's shown up the last 3 years and even going back further into his Texas Tech years. The Cardinals, since he arrived in 2019, have been a solid to very good first half team of the season. In 2019, they started 3-3-1. In 2020, they started 5-2. And in 2021, they started 7-0. So you're like, okay, great. So Cliff really knows how to coach in the first half. The problem is Cliff in the second half of the season does not really have the numbers at all. It's actually quite bad. If we go back to 2019, after starting 3-3-1, he went 2-7 to end the season. Following in 2020, after starting 5-2, he went 3-6. That's bad. And then in 2021, after starting 7-0, the Cardinals had a ton of hype around them, especially after just a lot going in. And then they had lost to Green Bay, and I feel like that really kind of let the air out of the balloon, so to speak. They went 3-5 to end the season and got embarrassed. And I mean, probably one of the most embarrassing performances in the postseason we've seen recently for a team in that playoff game against their eventual Super Bowl champion Rams. That mark of Cliff being a bad second half coach really doesn't help when, especially I think, for those first, 6 games of the season, especially when they're missing DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think that they're going to start that hot. I mean, he's leaned on being, like I said, a good first half coach, but their start to the season is Kansas City, Vegas, the Rams, Panthers, Philly, and Seattle. To me, that looks like 2-4. I think, to me, maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on that, but I think that looks like a 2-4 start. And I know you can say last year, Cliff went 4-0 against the Rams and versus the 49ers. I don't see that happening again. I really don't. I don't think the Cardinals measure up to those other two teams in the division. I could see them beating San Francisco, certainly, if Trey Lance is not the guy that they expect him to be. I mean, realistically, to start the season, they could start 0-3 with games against Kansas City, Vegas, and the Rams. That's not great for a guy who is a head coach. Starts usually pretty well. So if they start slow, I think in the second half, if things hold up, which, by the way, this isn't just a thing that goes back to, his start in the NFL. He's had this issue all the way through Texas Tech as well, too. His time there, he never had a season where he had a second half over 500 at Tech, and it's continued here in the NFL. I think what happens in some ways is that Cliff gets really creative in the first half of the year and lets almost everything out of the bag too much. That's why they start so hot. But then teams just start to figure it out, and his play calling becomes a little bit more vanilla, and I think that's why you see the Cardinals struggle. So I think when you combine the lackluster offseason with my lack of confidence in Cliff Kingsbury, again, proving that he's not a guy who really succeeds in the second half of the season, I do have a lot of doubt of where the Cardinals go. I really like Kyler Murray. There are things I do certainly like about the Cardinals, but the things that I like are outweighed by the things that concern me going into the season. And to think that they possibly, have 10 wins, I just find that as such a stretch, because not only do they play what is, my opinion, the toughest division currently on paper in the NFC, but their AFC opponent this year is the AFC West. And the AFC West is just a gauntlet. And they end the season with some really tough games against Denver, the Chargers. I mean, you throw in a lot of games. They have divisional games in there at the end too. Again, it really concerns me. I don't think this team can get to 10 wins based off what they've done this offseason and based off the way that their schedule shakes out and the coach that they have. I think in a lot of ways, if Kyler takes another step, maybe they get close to that 10 wins. But I think that's just such a heavy mark for them to hit, especially, like I said, for the things, the division, the schedule, the coaching. I just don't think it's there. I think the Cardinals take a step back this season, maybe. It'll be interesting, going into next offseason, what they do with Kyler and how they handle that situation. But I think 9.5 wins to say that they get 10 wins this season, to me, is really rich, considering all the things that I've named. I just don't see it. So for me, if you wanted to lock it in, and I suggest you do, because I don't think I'm going to be wrong on this, is that Cardinals under 9.5 wins, I got to go with the under. Because to me, and when you bet these over-unders, it's for me, it's more finding, the games I think they're more likely to lose. And I think when you see a lot of the games on the Cardinals schedule, I see more losses than I do certainly wins. And I know that's a silly and mundane thing to say, but the way that things schedule out for them, they play a lot of teams that they are, in my mind, inferior to this season, talent-wise, coaching-wise, and just terms of what they've done. I don't see the Cardinals hitting over that 10-win mark. So for me, 9.5, slam the under. Not saying putting your house on it or, take out a second mortgage to do it. There's a lot of confidence in my mind going into this. I think an under 9.5 for the Cardinals bangs it out. I like what I see with that. Minus 180, maybe I wish the odds were a little bit better for that, a little bit more enticing. But I think it's pretty safe to say in my mind. So, yeah, if you want to tail along, I think I'm pretty solid with these future bets. Ride along with it. I hope we make some money. I know it's a little bit far off, but this is an investment I think is certainly worth your time looking into. So, yeah, for VegasOdds.com, I'm Clark Farhenthold. Can't wait to see you guys next time.